Hi guys, my name is Trinity, and if you are here to check in with the Ready Player Read Readathon, because this is my wrap-up. Team Paragon 1! I'm so excited. We had such a small team. I think we had 8 people participating, 4 blackouts for the bingo board that we had, so it was great. Loved my team, loved getting to know the people that were on my team in a more intimate setting. It was fantastic, and I'm excited to do this again. Very, very excited to do this again. You're probably here for the books though, right? Right. I am going to talk to you guys about these in prompt order, not the order that I read them in. And then I do want to mention that I started Master of Poisons, didn't like it. So I ended up DNFing that one. I did, however, find a book to take its place, but let's talk about that one for a little bit because I DNF'd it. I have come to find out I don't really like African storytelling, and I think it's the cadence of it that I don't like. It's really hard for my brain to process, and I'm not exactly sure why, but my brain just doesn't like the cadence of it, and I have a tendency to DNF them. And I've learned, because I read Black Leopard, Red Wolf recently, I read Tade Thompson for this, I read Benty a while ago, but there's like the cadence of the writing, it just doesn't click with me. And so I did end up DNFing Master of Poisons. On that note, for the Spaceship Prompt, a book set in space, Far from the Light of Heaven by Tade Thompson. And like I said, the African style storytelling, I don't really like the cadence of it. I don't know what it is about it, but you know, there are writing styles that are just not for everyone. And this is one that's not for me. But Far from the Light of Heaven, I did enjoy this for the most part. It was the writing style that I didn't click with, but I went ahead and finished it to go ahead and get my team points for the prompt. I liked when the action finally caught up to the story in this book, but the first part of it was pretty, I don't want to say boring. That's not what I'm thinking. It was really slow, and it took a moment for anything to actually like be interesting. Like, we're setting up the story, I get that, but there was just so much foreshadowing and so much pre-story that I was like, why did we start here? I don't understand why we started here. But we find out there's a murderer on board this ship. That's kind of the whole basis of this story. And it took so long to get there that by the time we got there, I knew what was coming, and I was like really bored. I did still end up giving it 3 stars anyway, because like I said, it's a writing style that's not for me. That doesn't mean it's not good, but I didn't enjoy it. So take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. The next prompt would be an 80s cover. I'll put an image up here because I did listen to this book on audiobook, and we went back and forth. Okay, everyone said, yeah, 1880s. But I was thinking of the old Clive Barker book covers when I thought 80s for this one, but it passed. It passed. And I read A Dowry of Blood. I really enjoyed this book. It is very much a gothic story. We are with the brides of Dracula, so it definitely reads like a gothic novel. And I really loved the exploration of someone forced into a situation that they didn't know exactly what they were getting into, but now they don't know how to get out of it. And I really liked that part of it. It is dark. There are some dark things that happen. Of course, like I said, you're dealing with the brides of Dracula, and it is bisexual. So that's another twist on the typical Dracula tale, but I really, really enjoyed the writing. I thought the slow build to the horror of this book was good. And yeah, it's definitely a book that I would recommend to other people, especially if you like tales of Dracula or Gothic novels, or even if you just like the themes that I just talked about with isolation and, you know, living up to other people's standards and things like that. So a book set in Oasis. I did not read that one. However, my friend Tessa came through and read a book for me, so I did get to check that box off. And then based on a video game, I read Blue Wraith, which I enjoyed for the most part. The beginning setup of it read very much like a story I had written, so I was like, okay, this is weird, and I don't like that part. But I mean, it's Dragon Age. There's only so much you can do. Who cares if the beginning of it is very similar to my story and the character looks exactly like mine, right? But anyway, I thought Blue Wraith was a good addition to the Fenris story, and if you are a Dragon Age fan, I would highly recommend picking up the Blue Wraith graphic novels. Next, for Wyvern or Dragon, I read Together We Burn by Isabel Ibanez. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It has been a while. There are some YA I've really loved recently, but this one surprised me because we have a flamenco dancer. Her dad is a dragador, which is a matador that fights dragons, and the setup of it was just really interesting because this is not your typical fantasy that you read, and having it being so immersed in Spanish culture, I thought was absolutely fantastic. There's a lot of Spanish in here, so if you are not familiar with Spanish, I was glad I had it on audio so that I could immersive read, because I actually understand Spanish when it's spoken to me most of the time. Not all the time, but a good majority of the time. And so hearing it for me was a very good thing to have, because otherwise I might have just been like, I don't even know what that sentence said. But I really, really enjoyed it. And if you are looking for a story about dragons that's a little outside the box, that delves into a culture you're not familiar with, or if you are familiar with Spanish culture, I think that you'll really enjoy this one. Female protagonist, I read The Hacienda by Isabel Canas. Now, I probably edited out that I said Isabel Canas first when I said Isabel Ibanez, because that confused me for a minute. But yes, Gothic at its finest again. We do have a very good mix of Mexican Gothic meets Rebecca. That's what I was hoping for. That was the comps it gave, and that's what I got. I was very, very intrigued by this. Plus, you have more Spanish culture, and I was very, very into all of the lore that started to come out in this book. It was fantastic. And if you liked Mexican Gothic, I think you'll like The Hacienda. If you didn't like Mexican Gothic, you might not like The Hacienda, unless you're just in the mood for like that Spanish culture that I'm talking about. I did totally forget that I had the book sitting beside me and was reading off of the list I had online. But the next one was a book by a Discord member, and I read A Touch of Light by Tiago Abdallah. And I loved this. I did have the audio, so Kevin Kemp, he did read it to me. And I followed along with the physical. I love immersive reading, you guys know that. This book is so good. So good. I really, really enjoyed it. And now I've heard a couple of people say that it's really confusing. I get why. I get why people say that. But here, the thing that is different about this book, as opposed to other fantasy novels, there's no info dumping in this book. It all comes out in bits and pieces as Tiago continues the story. And so sometimes you're like, wait, what happened? Or how did that happen? But you find out. Like you read it and you find out, and there's no info dumping. Even though it's a little bit of a chonker, there's no info dumping. It is just a really good story told at the time without a whole lot of backstory. And I loved that. I loved that about this book because I am always frustrated when I get a massive info dump. And to not have that with this was awesome. This book ends in a way that I'm like, I need the next one. I need it now. I need it so badly. As far as the writing goes, I think Thiago did an absolutely amazing job writing this. I can't believe that this is a debut. That is blowing my mind a little bit. But I love the exploration of religion in fantasy novels because this is why people go to war. That's still why people go to war, you know? And whenever you use that in a fantasy setting, I really like seeing when the dynamics are not Christianity versus whoever else. And this is two religions that are made up that center around death. And I think that's really, really cool. I love it. It is dark. It does get pretty dark throughout the book. I know why some people want to deem this grimdark. I don't think that I would go to the level of calling it grimdark, but it is dark fantasy. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Okay, the other prompt that I did not get to was Avatar, a book with a misleading title. I had meant to read How to Stop Time by Matt Haig, but I never could get it from the library. Like, it just kept getting delayed. And so I did end up reading it very recently. So whenever you guys see my July wrap up, I will talk about that then, but didn't make it. But Tessa did come through for me one more time on the board and read a book with a misleading title for me to fill out this slot. Next up was Alternate Reality, and I finally read Dread Nation. This is on my Pop Sugar Challenge, so I was very excited to take it off the list, and it was really good. It was really good. So again, we have another young adult, but this is one that I think people should read, just because it's an examination of the South at the time of the Civil War, and the way these girls are recruited is... there's some dark things that are going on, but you know, having them be the zombie slayers is pretty dang cool. I thought it was pretty awesome. Now, there is a lot of the issues of the time coming to the forefront of this book. So if that's not something that you're interested in reading, maybe not pick up this one, but I think it tackles them in a way that deep and moving, but also palatable. It's very well done for a YA. Like, I think that this was meant for a YA audience. It reads like it's for a YA audience, but adults can read it and get something out of it. So I really, really enjoyed this, and I'm looking forward to picking up Deathless Divide very soon, very, very soon. All right, so I have one that I did not DNF, but probably should have. For Evil Overlord, I read Girls of Paper and Fire. It's a young adult, but it deals with girls who are recruited into a harem. And the evil overlord that the prompt is fulfilling is the king, and he treats the girls horribly. I didn't like it. There was not anything I really even kind of liked about it, and I don't know why. I like dark stories, so that's not what's putting me off to it. But the writing was really slow. I don't like it when things are presented in a harsh way, but then not dealt with. That seemed to happen quite a few times in this book, and I just didn't like that at all. And then when the struggle doesn't feel real. Like, I know these girls go through some really, really horrible things, but a lot of it doesn't feel real. And so I had a hard time with that. I had a really, really hard time connecting to the characters, caring about the characters. And it just wasn't for me. I gave it 2 stars. I did not like The Girls of Paper and Fire. And like I said, I kept reading some of these books because I wanted the points for the readathon, and maybe I shouldn't have. Next, of course, one of my obsessions would pop in. A Dragon Age has already made an appearance, but we have books set in a harsh world. And I read Heir to the Empire by Timothy Zahn, Star Wars Essential Legends collection. So I had heard that I really needed to delve into the Thrawn trilogy, mainly because I am a fan of Kylo Ren. I really, really love Kylo Ren. If you guys don't see him, he's right there. And so I had heard that, yes, Han and Leia had a son, but they had twins. But the son's storyline does kind of follow what Disney did with Kylo Ren. So I want to read what they based Kylo Ren off of. So I was told to start here. That's where I'm starting. I liked this one. I was not a huge fan of this particular one, but I can see where the story is going, and I have a feeling I'm really, really gonna like this trilogy. I think this is suffering a little bit of first book syndrome. Like, we have a lot of setup in this book, and that's not something I enjoy reading. So, you know, I have a pretty extensive Star Wars background. There's some things in here that felt a little overdone and that I didn't need, and that's probably why I didn't enjoy it as much as I should have. I definitely should have, because I really liked the majority of what was here and the beginning of this story. But yeah, I'm very excited to continue with Thrawn and see what happens from here. The next one was posed as Shelfie. So, I mean, here's a Shelfie here. But I was able to fulfill that prompt. Next was our free space. And I'm going to say there's another book that I'm disappointed with. And I know why. I shouldn't be disappointed with this book, to be perfectly honest with you. It just was not what I wanted. So for our free space, we could pick any book that we wanted. And so I read Daughter of Redwinter by Ed McDonald. Is this a good book? Yes, it's great. However, I went into it wanting this grim, dark, gritty fantasy, you know, not necessarily, you know, a spin-off of Blackwing, but similar to Blackwing. I mean, I read just about everything Anthony Ryan has written, and they're all different, but they still have that gritty, harsh world type of vibe to them. This didn't have that. This is a magical, light, slow build fantasy novel. And it's good, but it's not what I wanted from Ed McDonald. So my disappointment's really high. But the fact that it seems like he was able to shift gears and write an entirely different book is also very impressive. I don't know. I live on two sides with this book. I think I ended up giving it a 3.5, which I rounded to a 4-star on Goodreads. And my 3.5 is definitely bogged down in the fact that I wanted this dark, gritty story and I didn't get that. But I'm also, again, like very impressed that it seems like a completely different author wrote this book. So I don't know how to feel about that. Indie publisher, why not go as indie as you can and go self-pub? I read On the Winds of Quasars, the follow-up to In the Orbit of Sirens by T.A. Bruno, which I absolutely loved. The first book. I loved this one too. My only issue with this one is it could have used a little bit more editing. I found myself getting caught up in things that were repetitive, and I know the help of a good editor would have quashed that, but the fact that that's the only issue I have with this book, like, I loved the rest of it. I loved it. I love this series. I'm so excited to read the final book of this series. And I know the audiobook's coming out next month, so I might hold out and do another immersive read because I've loved immersive reading these. They are great books to do that with. But let me just say, this book upped the ante of In the Orbit of Sirens. And so I'm very much looking forward to, like I said, finishing this, see what happens to these characters that I've really enjoyed reading about. There are a couple of things that are kind of in the air at the end of this book. I'm okay with that because, you know, this is the middle book. We had to have something to go off of. But, again, highly impressed by T.A. Bruno. Really enjoyed this one. I think In the Orbit of Sirens is still my favorite book of the year. So, well done, T.A. Bruno. I enjoyed it. Okay, so the novella that I decided to read for the Readathon, What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. I did not like this one at all. Not at all. And I have a problem reading books where it feels like an essay of this, I need you to accept this, and this is what it's going to be. And I've had a couple of books like that, like accept the fact that I'm non-binary. That's this one. Accept the fact that I'm gay. Accept the fact that I'm polyamorous. You know, like, I don't like books that read like it's trying to convince you that you should believe this way. And I mean, I get that way with books that are heavily religious. I do like Lightbringer, you know, but I don't like when books read that way. And this was accept my non-binary lifestyle. And I'm cool with that. Like, I love reading books with really good representation. I absolutely love The First Sister, Second Rebel by Lyndon A. Lewis. I love the way that that's done. I love the non-binary representation I have seen in other places. I believe Essa Hansen also has a non-binary character, but like, they're presented in a way that's not necessarily accept this, but this is the reality, you know? And so this book disappointed me greatly in reading like an essay on accepting non-binary people. And I already accept non-binary people, so it's not something I needed in my life. And I didn't like it. It's also supposed to be a retelling of an Edgar Allan Poe story. And I'm even more disappointed that this was like the stepping stone that launched this story, because I really love Edgar Allan Poe and Gothic novels, and I should have liked this one, but just didn't work for me. Not at all. So, a debut novel. I hit panic mode a little bit towards the end of this and was like, I don't have time to read this. And I was supposed to read The Book Eaters by Suni Dean, and guess what? I did read it, and I absolutely loved it. It was so good. It is the exact thing I have been looking for to pull me out of my fantasy funk, to like give me that just rich gothic novel and vampires that aren't vampires, and you know, just I loved it. The Book Eaters was absolutely fantastic. And I'm probably going to do a full review of it because I loved it so much. But I just want to say, if you love Gothic novels, if you love like stories about isolation and like a dowry of blood, the themes were very similar. And I loved both of them. And having read them through this readathon made my readathon great, because there were some books that were really disappointing. And so, you know, having these two, The Dowry of Blood and The Book Eaters, but yeah, I will do a full review of The Book Eaters for you guys. But just know, I loved it so much. Loved it. But because of my panic, I read the book eaters for someone else once my board was completed. Now, I read The Monster of Ellenhaven. I really enjoyed this one too. This was definitely gritty, gory, dark, gross, gothic, short story. And again, I love gothic novels. So I was really engrossed in this. It was really good. I gave it 4 stars. And this is about a guy. Well, I can't even tell you what this one is about because a lot of it's spoilery. It's one of those that you kind of just need to read it. Read it and figure out what's going on. Just know it's dark, it's gory, it's gross sometimes, and it's pretty hard hitting. There are gay characters in it, and I think that's all you need to know going in, but discovering the story is part of what made this book so great. So yeah, I would recommend doing that. All right, and then I needed to pick a friend's favorite, and Andrew loves Nightmareland by Daniel Barnett. So of course I went ahead and picked up Lullaby. Loved it. I loved it. I loved the first one. I loved this one. I can't wait to continue. These are horror, and they are horror novellas. And someone, I think it was Andrew from Wizardly Reads, recently said that these books were kind of inspired by Stephen King's The Stand. I don't like Stephen King, but I really do like these books. But Stephen King is a whole nother spiel. So if you like The Stand by Stephen King, I have heard that you will really like these novellas and that they were the inspiration for these. So but yes, really, really enjoyed this book. Okay, next I needed a graphic novel set in space. I read Saga. I thoroughly enjoyed this. Now, this is an SFW, so very, very much do not read this in public because there are some scenes that they're graphic. I love the weirdness of this. So we had to read a graphic novel set in space. I think I said that. Maybe I didn't. But yes. And my friend Izzy had sent this to me and I was like, perfect, perfect. I love the art. I don't know what art of it I can show you or if I can show you. But yeah, here we go. Like, I love the art style. It's very cool. And I like the story. And it, like I said, is very, very weird, but in the best way. And yes, there is a baby breastfeeding on the cover, so you kind of get an idea that this just pulls no punches. And I do want to mention that there is a like 6-year-old sex slave in this, but that's not something that you see, and that kind of gets resolved. I don't want to spoil anything, but trigger warnings, I would look up trigger warnings for Saga, but I think that this is a graphic novel series that I will probably continue. Next book is African Futurism, and I read Escaping Exodus by Nikki Drayden. I loved this. Man, this is one of the weirdest books that I've ever loved. I do have a tendency to like weird things, but they have to hit that right level of weird, and this totally does. So these characters are living inside a space beast, and you get all that entails. Like they travel through the anus and the stomach, and it can get really, really gross, but I loved it so much. It was so unique and just a little bit, like just enough outside of the box that I was captivated. I loved it. I loved it so much. And the struggle that these characters go through feels real. Like I have mentioned even in this video, I don't like it when the struggle doesn't feel real. These characters, you do feel for them, and yes, this is gonna make it in one of my favorite sci-fi Like, it's going to be in my top 10 favorite sci-fi. But I know there's a continuation of this, and I can't wait to get my hands on it. I did think that this was a standalone sci-fi, but recently I saw someone say that there is a second book now, and yeah, I want to read it. I want to read it. It sounds like it's going to be great. All right, and then I had to read a 500+ page book, and I read Shortfall by Robert Jackson Bennett. I love these characters. I love these characters. And oh man, does so much happen in Shortfall. I loved Foundry Side, but this brought everything Foundry Side had and more. Everything was elevated. The stakes were higher. The characters had some character shifts. The ending destroyed my soul. Destroyed my soul. I'm not okay. I actually had to take a day off after reading this because I was like, I can't deal. I can't deal. But I'm so looking forward to Locklands, the final book of this trilogy. Just know that if you were like iffy on Foundry Side, like if you wrote that line of, I liked it, but I don't know if I want to continue, continue. Please continue. And if you kind of didn't like the childish humor at times, I get it. But the characters grow in this story, and oh, it's so worth continuing. It's so worth continuing. I loved it. I think I gave Shortfall 5 stars. I'm pretty sure I did. I enjoyed this so much. All right. Next, we had Animal Companion, and I read Killing Gravity. This was a quick, kind of fun, but really high stakes short adventure. And the animal companion in this, its name is Seven. It is freaking adorable. I want a 7. I don't even know what you would call it. But anyway. It's a little creature and it acts kind of like a cat, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. But like I said, this is a fun high stakes short story. So I don't want to get too much into what it's about because it's short. Anything I said would be kind of a spoiler, but the main character in this book is pretty badass. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think I gave it 4 stars. For a short story, I mean, come on now. And it was a novella. I keep saying short story, but it was a novella. And yeah, definitely worth the read. SFF with horror elements. I read the other graphic novel that Izzy sent me and read, Monstrous. Now, I did like this one. I didn't like this one as much as I liked Saga. However, the art style in here is absolutely beautiful. My bookmark is in there, but I finished it. I just shoved my bookmark back in there when I put it back in its case. Yeah, I liked this. Now, I did have a problem. I was reading it in the car. Look how tiny the print is. So I had a really hard time reading in the car. But the story is really good. And I think I could continue with this one too and be pretty happy with it. I do like Saga more. But this is also a very good story. And if you're wanting to get into graphic novels, either one of these I think would be a really good starting place. Okay, next is another one that I was a little bit disappointed with, but we had to read an LGBTQIA+ author. I chose Shauna Maguire and Every Heart a Doorway. This is on my Pop Sugar Challenge, so I said, why not? I didn't like it. I think I like the idea of this story, but it's not fleshed out enough for me to actually invest in the story. I do think I will probably continue and read at least the next novella and see what I think about it from there. Or I might pick these up when I just need something to, like a palate cleanser. But I wasn't really invested in this book. And I kind of remember what happened. And even though it's really, really short, like I remember the gist of it. Portal fantasy and things like that. And people finding worlds where they belong because they don't really fit into our world. It's really cool, but also like a bit campy. And so, I mean, I liked it somewhat. I liked it enough that I would continue, but I don't get the hype, I guess I should say. Okay, and this falls into another Trinity panicked and decided to read a short novella instead of an actual book. 1 year on the TBR, I read To Be Taught If Fortunate by Becky Chambers. I did want to give Becky Chambers a second chance. She's not for me. She is not for me. I thought this book was absolutely boring. I'm sorry. I know it's very well loved. And I know it has a lot to say, but I thought it was really, really boring. And last but not least, for archetypal hero, the Paragon Square, I read Traitor's Blade by Sebastian de Castile, and it was okay. So I know that Traitor's Blade is very well loved. I know a lot of people thought I was going to love it. I do think I will continue with this series. I didn't love the first one, and I was afraid I wasn't gonna love it. And I was afraid that I would read it and people would be like, how dare you not like this book? I like darker books though. This didn't give me a whole lot of what I want out of a fantasy. But I've heard as you continue, the books get better. I'm definitely willing to continue, but I will continue on audio. I don't think it's a book series that I want to own. And the reason I don't have the physical copy is I've already taken it back to the buy-sell trade. So, you know, like I said, it was good. It was good enough that I am going to continue, even though I will be continuing via audio. All right, that is it for my video today. Like, subscribe, do all the fun things, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.